He's someone I've known for years now. We've been on each other's podcast. Great guy. He's the founder and CEO of Acceleration Partners, a global marketing agency, which has won many awards, including many Best Place to Work awards, Glassdoor, Fortune, Inc., Ad Age. So this isn't just theory. He's built a thriving, fast growth business while preserving an amazing place to work. When you go to his website, you're going to be able to sign up for his newsletter. It's like crazy popular. Like over 200,000 people get his newsletter. It's a great newsletter. He has a podcast out. So go to the website and you get all of those goodies. He's the Wall Street Journal best-selling author of 4 books, and we're here to celebrate his newest book, Elevate Your Team. Please welcome Robert Glazer. Bob, thanks for joining us. You got to unmute yourself, Bob, and we're going to be set.
Thanks for having me. Sorry.
No, I was just, I know you're dealing with some proverbial fires and everything. So I appreciate you carving out some time.
All good. This is much more fun than trying to move money around.
Depends which direction that money's moving, Bob. That's what I always say.
Fair.
So, Bob, we have just, about 15 minutes with you, and everyone's here is going to get a copy of the book. So we just like to tease it, get people ready and excited for it. You and I have known each other for years now. You've been such a champion of culture. We've talked about employee engagement for so long. You've written several other books. I mean, here's a softball. Why this book? Why now?
The why now is just luck, actually. It's better to be lucky than smart sometimes. I think there's a story in the book about how I had come to these 4 sort of elements in this notion of capacity building as a personal and leadership development kind of framework. And that was my first book was about. And a lot of people have used that and used that with their teams around sort of how do we build kind of individuals up and get them, ready to lead. And then we were having some growth challenges as an organization. When I started to kind of dig into those and like what's going on, I was like, maybe it's kind of the same solution, but it was how do we build capacity as an organization? And rather than individual, how could that same framework be applied to the company and the culture? So I actually started on this book a couple of years ago with a lot of the things that we had done. I mean, we grew 30% for 10 years without any outside capital, 30 Best Places to Work awards, really focused on growing the business by growing the people. I think the last 10 years has been a lot of like grow the business and like, if everything else breaks along the way, all the people, that's fine. But what's interesting about the timing is that, this book comes out at a time where I think people need a new playbook. You talked a lot about playbook. I just don't think even Elon Musk, who's built all these companies with this thing, said to everyone, hey, if you don't want to work super intense and super hard, then quit. And a quarter of the company quit the next day. So everyone now is playing defense. The cheap money, fast steroid growth era is over. But I'm a growth guy. I think growth is like a bad word right now because no one wants to deal with it. But we're going to shift back from defense to offense. And I think it's how do we grow businesses and that have upside for the business and the shareholder, the employees, and that there's kind of a win-win there. And so the book is kind of a playbook on how to do that.
Yeah, I love that. It's that balanced approach. Anyone who ever has worked in any of my companies over the last 30 years, I talk about, I would call it the ICE triangle: investors, customers, employees, and trying to balance that over the long term. And it's hard. Sometimes you need to give back to investors, and that might cost a little bit on the employee side, or you got to invest in the product for customers, and things are a little bit out of balance. But the economy is going to go, ups and downs. It always has, it always will. But how do we create that, sustainable team culture and company culture?
Right. And after the pandemic, people are tired and they're exhausted, right? So they don't want to work just 100-hour weeks to work, but I still think they need to believe in something and want to have improvement and want to get better and want to learn. Again, where growth doesn't become a bad word. I think right now for people, like, I don't want to grow, like can barely survive.
Yeah. Well, so this was actually the first question I wanted to ask. So when people get the book, the chapter titles are things like, build your team's spiritual capacity, build your team's intellectual capacity, physical capacity, emotional capacity. And one of the ones that jumped out at me, because you don't usually see it in a business book, is build your team's physical capacity. Now, I'm also on a health kick this year and all this kind of stuff, but talk a little bit about this idea. What do you mean by we should be building our team's physical capacity?
Yeah. So physical capacity is your sort of mental and physical well-being. And I think particularly with all the people working remote and hybrid, burnout is so high because we've just lost a lot of boundaries between work. And so there's a lot in there about how leaders can sort of help restore, focusing on outcomes, helping people establish some boundaries, so that work is not a 24/7 thing. I think in order for people to come to work energized, they need to have stuff outside of work they care about. They need to have hobbies and their family and stuff that kind of recharges them. A lot of the stuff that, there's kind of an anti-case study in the book that I don't think is talked about enough about Marissa Mayer and sort of her time at Google and coming in talking about 100-hour work week, do the math on 130-hour work week. Like she kind of told the press about that. Like there's not even any time to sleep. They did 52 acquisitions, which are all worthless. Like doing a lot of stuff all the time doesn't actually produce a better outcome. That's the lose-lose thing, is that I don't actually think it's better for business. I think figuring the priorities, aligning people around that, having them, work and be engaged, and then some separation, let them go on a vacation. I mean, I talk about just the type of out of office message you set as a leader for a vacation. Kevin, if you say, hey team, I'm going on vacation, but you can reach me here or here or here, let me know if there's any problem. Like that models to everyone that like a vacation is not a vacation. Yeah. If you send one, as I shared at a conference, they were laughing hysterically. I don't have it on the screen here. If this guy said, going on a vacation with my family, this is my sacred time. If it's a real emergency, you can text my wife's cell phone number and she'll let me know, or email me at interruptmyvacation@thecompaniesdomain.com. Right. So there's a leader who's actually saying to people, like, I want you to have some time off and it's important.
Yeah. And I like certain phrases, and like in your book, you talk about, don't celebrate hero time. So the Marissa Mayer case study was amazing because it's not just that she was working 160 hours. That's one kind of a problem.
Didn't produce any
and she's bragging about it. She over and over again would just brag in the press about all these hours. And more recently, I'm sure that was when Elon Musk was like saving Tesla by sleeping on the factory floor, working these crazy hours. And sort of like at that level, you want your CEO to be like cognitively sharp and making right decisions, not sleep deprived. That's
there's a stat in the book that people that perpetually get under 6 or 5 hours of sleep show up as cognitively impaired to work as someone who is drunk.
Yeah.
So this is why I never believe in paying your lawyer to work at 1 a.m. in the morning for $700 an hour when they can't read fast at all, right? I mean, it's costing you twice as much money.
You just hired a drunk lawyer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And I said, of course, I wrote that book, 15 Secrets Success We Know About Time Management. I shared when I was young and dumb, I was one of those work around the clock 7 days a week. And my story I start the book with is I remember getting pulled over by a cop at like 5:30 in the morning. And I was speeding down the highway, just half asleep, out of my mind. He says, do you know why I pulled you over? I said, I must have been speeding. He said, speeding? He says, you pulled up on my bumper in the slow lane, moved over the fast lane, passed me, and I never saw him. It wasn't an unmarked car, Bob.
He thought you were drunk, right? He
probably thought I was drunk. And it's because I hadn't slept in like days. It was just absolutely crazy.
So look, creating the space so that people can be healthy. Like to me, these things are holistic. And as part of the book, there's not someone in their personal life who's terrible with prioritization, terrible with budgeting, sleeps like crap and wakes up exhausted and then walks into work and all those things are good. Like we're the same people. We don't even walk into work anymore. We turn on the computer now. So I'm not, again, this is not a fluffy thing. Like we have a high performance company and culture and standards and growing 30% a year. But it's the understanding that actually like there are best practices out there. And if we can help people with those best practices, like we've coached people around, like, what does a good morning routine look like? Like, what does a world-class morning routine look like? Because it makes a difference how you show up to work, but it also makes a difference how you show up for your family or otherwise. I mean, I fought with employees about this because I was a big Hal Elrod fan. And they'd say, I'd like, look, do a morning routine, even if it's 15 minutes. And there were parents of kids, young parents, and they'd say, my kids wake me up at 5:30. I can't do it. And I would say, how's that working for you? My alarm clock, and they're like, it sucks. I wake up to screaming kid. I'm like, try getting up 15 minutes early, get a cup of coffee, and just like have a few minutes to yourself before they run into your room. And they're like, you know what? That was so much better. I need to do that.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the morning routines. And it's crazy. It's like almost embarrassing how much time I spend on my morning routine. Like for people looking at me, they just think I'm sitting there like doing nothing, but I'm like in my head going through the rituals and everything.
Yeah.
So it's good. Yeah, Evan Watkins here, who is head of our community, and marketing. He said to me, this was just last week. He says, "Hey, Kevin, can I take a week off during this time in the summer? That's when I'm getting married." And everyone can congratulate Evan on getting engaged, by the way, in the meeting chat. And he said, "Can I have this week off?" I'm like, "A week?" He says, "Yeah." I'm like, "Evan, you're getting married. Don't you think you should take at least 2 weeks?" He's like, "Oh, okay, that's probably a good idea." I had to push him to take a 2-week vacation when the poor man's getting married.
Yeah, and again, you could look. The inverse of some of this is true too. I think that work. We have a culture of high accountability and flexibility. You get flexibility if you're accountable. I think this goes both ways. Someone says to me, "Can I go watch my kid's soccer game at 3 o'clock in the afternoon?" As long as you're not canceling on a critical client meeting, like I don't care. Get your work done at a different time. But like similarly, like if the client, if you're pitching a $10 million change the business thing, you might have to stay up late that night, or you might have to do it on a Sunday. Like I think it's got to be a two-way street. The key is just not to have that be every day and every night. But I think we are in some ways the opposite. I think employees now expect the company to be super flexible. You can't have it both ways. You can't say, "I want flexibility 9 to 5, and then outside of 9 to 5 is off. Like
right.
It has to be a little go both directions.
Yeah. Well, and you teed up again, the very next thing, you have a chapter in there, you talk about building the path. And you had just said like, oh, a culture of freedom, but accountability. And it reminds me of like the old Netflix way of, there's, lots of freedom, but accountability. And you talk about the difference though, between like a catch and release model versus a meritocracy. And I thought that was some interesting new thinking in those areas. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the worst is there's 3 types of organizations. The worst is the first job I had. I call it star stifler. So these are organizations that don't grow. Any emerging talent is seen as a threat to an incumbent layer that's never going to leave and has finished the politics. And so it's like, if you have great people, keep them down. Catch and release was kind of Patty McCord Netflix. "Hey, go be from Netflix." Or "I've got 2 great VPs of finance. I've trained them. Only one's going to be the CFO. Like I actually support that person to go elsewhere." Like you kind of, catch and release is a noble, great thing, as long as you are not constantly creating superstars at other organizations, because you're good at the hiring and training, and then you don't make space for the people. The example I give in the book of the best person I think of this, like a leader in the world, is Bill Belichick, the coach of the New England Patriots. He has never had any, no matter where someone was drafted, what they were paid, he's actually, and in sports it should be, he's just never had any legacy around the best person is on the field. It doesn't matter this. And the story I tell in the book is 2003, the Patriots had just signed franchise quarterback Drew Bledsoe, $100 million contract. He's like the face of the organization. He gets hurt in the 3rd game. This scrawny backup quarterback comes in and plays the next 8 games that no one had ever heard of and plays really, really well. And the team's like on a roll. And Belichick's like, "I'm going with a hot hand. This guy's hot and it's special. And that guy is Tom Brady." So imagine how many leaders out there have kept the Tom Brady on the bench or let the Tom Brady go lead the other team. So look, you can't do pure meritocracy all the time. I think it'd be super disruptive in an organization to be like, "Look, tomorrow this guy gets better than you tomorrow and we replace you." But I think you have to take an objective look around, do I have a real superstar, and am I giving them space to grow, or am I letting people that aren't as good of them stay there for reasons of loyalty or otherwise?
Yeah, and I think it's know the company. I mean, I think most of the people in this community are in fairly large companies, and if a company's growing, then there's upward mobility, a better chance of upward mobility and holding on to your stars. Smaller companies or slower growth, it becomes a little bit harder. But I think as long as you're upfront about the model as well, right? I mean, I think a lot of consulting companies bring in a bunch of college graduates and tell them like a year from now, only one out of 10 of you are going to still be here, or whatever that is. But they tell them up front. Everybody knows what they're signing up.
They know the game. Yeah,
they know the game. But obviously, the better thing is let's all get Tom Brady in the game as much as we can.
Yeah.